and welcome to the Everyday Board Game Podcast with your hosts, Daniel
and Daniel.
Good morning, Daniel.
It is not morning. Quit lying to the people. It is the afternoon.
It's the evening.
It's the evening, actually.
It really is. It's almost 7:30 p.m.
Yeah.
But no, this is our second episode now in your casa with your beautiful selection of games behind us.
And a random box full of stuff on the bottom.
Guess where you shop? You're not a promoter of local businesses. No. You hate commerce.
It's some of my computer stuff that I had set up for my other office that I haven't put up over here. So,
yeah.
But I didn't realize it was in the background. Let's see if it actually shows up.
In the pipe, it will. Yeah. What we see on this screen is what the viewers are seeing.
Yep, there it is.
So this episode not brought to you by Amazon. Brought to you by all these wonderful games that are behind us.
Yeah, even though we're streaming on Twitch, which is brought to you by Amazon.
Which is brought to you by Amazon. But especially brought to you by Alea Games.
No, there's a queen.
All of the
right
game,
there.
None of the art. Anyway.
No, there's a queen game under all of them just because it's the biggest one. That's my Feld shelf right there, except for Tiki Topple.
Yeah, Tiki Topple was not made by Feld as far as I know.
No, it's just I needed a space for it, so it fit with that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you don't have any other Felds, do you? Are those the only ones?
Yeah, those are the only ones I have on me right now. There's other ones that I want to buy, just haven't pulled the trigger for it. I am going to be getting the other ones. Did you get the notification for the City Collection?
I did.
Little sad, but I understand the situation.
Yep.
And then the fact that the other two aren't even going to go till September, and we're not going to get all four of them at one time. So it's just like I thought I would be able to get into Hamburg and Amsterdam before I even back the other two.
Right, exactly. So remind me, I briefly looked through it. Tell me what actually they said. I mean, is it that they want to... that they're going to produce all of them at the same time?
Yeah, so there's been a bit of delay with their shipping, so they've been having issues with trying to get wood and stuff like that for the upgraded components and the acrylic. And so it's just pushing things back. So we should have already had the games. They should have been starting to ship now in August. Well, more than likely, the first two of the City Collections from the Seth von Feld Queen games probably won't hit us till, I think it said February or so, of 2022, and it's going to be shipping with the other two. So what they did was they already started mass producing New York and Rialto, or not New York and Marrakesh. Rialto is the New York is the new Rialto.
Yeah.
And so they started to print those at the same time they started printing the other two. So all four will be shipped together.
Okay. Well, see, I'm actually kind of looking forward to that then,
And if
I know I'm going to back the next one.
Yeah, and they're saying something, they're going to send notifications or something like that if you back the other two and you don't want to pay the increased price that's going to happen with the new two, New York and Rialto, then you can go ahead and fix it and pay the difference between the two, or you can wait till the Kickstarter starts for the new two, which again is New York and Marrakesh in September.
I wonder what city game that they're going to re-implement, like what was that other stuff on Feld, that like the soccer one?
I have no clue.
Brazil, maybe? Madrid, yeah. Maybe. I mean,
or Barcelona, they're a pretty big team too.
That's true. And Stefan Feld made a few different games. I remember a number of years ago, he announced that he was working on a miniatures game, like a war miniatures game.
Yeah, I think in 2019 he was talking about that, because he was talking about the expansions for Merlin that you can see right behind me. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, he was talking about that. And then he also mentioned that he was working on a minis game. I think it was an interview at Essen 2019.
It was at a convention, definitely. Yeah, so, man. I mean, I'm looking forward to that. If there's one person who could do it,
make you interested in it?
And make us interested in it. So, a quick spoiler, and this will go into where I'm going to go with on the next topic. On our what you've been playing lately, are you going to talk about that 2-player card game that you and I played?
No, I did not put it on my list. We can mention it briefly.
Speaking of designers that we like making really strange games, I think we should briefly bring that up.
Okay.
Yeah, we just played one of your games.
That you kept trying to steal because you've been wanting to try it.
And I've been wanting to try it because it's one of our favorite designers.
Yeah.
And it's quite honestly like almost an insta-buy. And it's called Pack of Heroes by Phil Walker Harding.
And mind you, it's one of his earlier games. We looked it up, 2014 or something like that?
2014 was when it was released.
Yeah, so almost
7 years ago.
Yeah.
Which I guess isn't that long, depending on,
in board game life, actually, it quite is.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it was fun. It was fine. It definitely didn't seem like it was his, though.
It did and it didn't. Like, for a battle game, that's basically what it was. It's a two-player battle game. So think Magic the Gathering or Keyforge or something like that, where you're just going back and forth, playing cards and fighting each other. But the thing about it is, for me, is how simple it actually is once we got into it. All you do is a movement in a 3x3 grid. Then you do either bring out a hero or an action. And then you unstun if you had someone stunned, and then refresh. Basically, you draw up a card until you have 3. And that's it.
Yeah. Last person standing wins.
Yeah, in essence.
It was okay. I don't know.
But you could tell it was like one of his earlier games now. Yeah. Now, here's the thing. Archaeology was one of his first games, and then he redesigned it for the new expedition and refined it, and people really enjoy that one. So I wonder if he would go back and maybe redesign this if someone else was like, well, it's Phil Walker Harding. Let's see what you can do after you fix this.
If he redid Pack of Heroes, would you buy it?
Probably.
Yeah, probably. I struggle if I would. I don't know if I would yet.
Well, we never played the original Archaeology, but from what I've heard about it, the new one is the much better, more streamlined game. Right. So if he did the same treatment that he did with Archaeology to Pack of Heroes, I'd probably end up backing it.
Okay. Interesting. Well, yeah, then, but speaking of what we've been playing lately, I mean, we went over that. Sorry, that was a tangent.
Yeah.
Daniel, what have you been playing lately?
So I have 4 games on my list here that now I have to use a clipboard since we're all in one room for my show notes. And one of the games that I did want to talk about that I did get to the table. Now, I didn't get to play a complete game, and actually 3 of these games weren't completed games, but I got the gist of it, so I wanted to talk about them. Okay. One of them, the first one I'm going to talk about, is Through the Ages, the 2015 one. You can see it right above me, right above Nations up there. It's the newest one that you can get out. It's a long game, so the box says 120 hours. If it's your first play, even with the shorter game, it's going to take longer because you're going to be learning a lot of stuff. We played maybe 2 hours, didn't get to finish it because I had to go I had to go do something with the wife. I think it was like 6 o'clock and we needed to have dinner or something like that. It's fun. I really enjoyed it. I love Civ games. I'm a big Civilization fan on the computer system, that computer game. And between Nations and Through the Ages, I've played both of them now. I like both of them really well. Through the Ages is the longer, more meatier, chunkier of the two. And so if I want to play a shorter Civilization game and still get that feel, I'd pick Nations over Through the Ages. But I think if I have the time and the commitment, I'd play Through the Ages. There is a lot of moving parts. And I think the big problem for me with Through the Ages is I play a lot of the app. I did end up getting the app when Asmodee was doing that big sale that they were doing for like phones and stuff like that, the Asmodee Digital. It takes care of all the finicky parts that you have to take care of in the board game, so it goes way quicker for one thing, and there's a lot less that you have to worry about, like the way you have to use the military and stuff like that in this one. It's good though. I just don't know how often I'll get it to the table for 1, its length, and 2, just the bit of a chore that it is because of all the little. There's so many moving parts. You have your actions, and then these come out, and then you keep doing this and going through different eras. So you start in the Antiquity Age, which is A on the cards. Then you go into the Medieval Age, which is a deck of cards that you have to go through. And once that's out, you move into the Second Age. Then the Third Age is the final age. And then finally, the Fourth Age basically is your final round, in a sense. But no, I have a really good time with it. I really enjoyed it. I don't know how often I'm going to hit the table, but I don't see myself getting rid of it either.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be curious to try it. I like... now imagine taking Through the Ages. Hear me out on this. And redesigning it from the perspective of a co-op designer, and then turning it into a roll and write. Roll Through the Ages is really good.
No, Roll Through the Ages is really good, and it does give you that little bit of a feel, because I played the one that you have with the wood chunky piece on there for you could keep track of your scores and stuff. It's really good. But you're comparing, no. it is nowhere near the depth.
Machikoro is more of a civilization game than Roll Through the Ages is.
Through the Ages is the board game equivalent of Sid Meier's Civilization.
Yeah.
And that's saying something because there is actual Sid Meier Civilizations, but I haven't played the new one, so I have nothing about it. But I have seen and learned to play this first one, and it kind of gives you that Civ feel, but through the ages. If you want that crunchy, militaristic, expanding in a sense, card play, and just feel like you're building an ancient civilization, there's a new video game out called Humankind, and it does a lot of the stuff that Through the Ages kind of does. Where you're going through antiquity ages, and then you can make your leader something different based on ancient leaders and time frames and stuff like that. Humankind does that. Civ or Through the Ages kind of does that too, because your leader could be Harambe or Hammurabi or Julius Caesar or Alexander the Great, and as you're going through the ages, you can end up getting, say, Sid Meier as a leader, or I just had the expansion. They got Steve Jobs in there as a leader too, and Bill Gates is another leader in there as well.
I mean, not who I'd first pick, but sure they were fine at leading their companies.
I do like the fact that they put Sid Meier in there, because they are honestly saying this is where we got the idea to translate into a board game.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's kind of a little Easter egg there.
Yeah, it's an homage.
Same reason why Essen's in Pandemic. It's a little Easter egg.
Yep, exactly. Okay, I'll give you that. My number 4, the one I want to talk about that I've been playing lately. Speaking of civilization games and really long games, you and I played Juicy Fruit. And it took us longer to read the rules than it did
to actually play the game.
It was, 20 minutes?
So we started the game 9:35, and we're done by like 9:50 something. I think it was like 21 minutes in total.
Yeah, it was incredibly fast.
It took us, because we pulled it out at 9 o'clock, and you're like, okay, I got to do this, and my wife went to bed, so I was like, okay, well, just get this game out, and then I'll get ready and stuff like that. Yeah. You were still, I told you that I was going to kick you out at 10. You were still out of the house by 10 because how quick that game went. And I was sitting there watching us read the rules and go through how to play it, and it's just like, this is going to be longer than I thought. Yep.
And as we're putting out pieces and getting the board set up and all of the tiles being drawn from the back. But no, really, what Juicy Fruits is it's a standard set collection. I get different kinds of fruits traded in for ships that are worth victory points. But what makes it neat is that the victory points on the ships are covering up parts of your board. And your board is where you shift the tiles over. And that's how you get your resources. You start with a 5x5 grid. And then some of the spaces are covered up with the ships. I'm sorry, a 3x3. It can expand to a 5x5.
Yeah.
And then the ships themselves block the spaces. So if I choose any one of my pieces, I move it as far as I want in a straight line. The number of spaces it does, it gives me that many resources. So if I move a plum 2 spaces, I can get 2 plums. Perfect. And then you trade those in and buy other things. Well, there's other tiles that give you different fruit or a combination of fruit. Or bonuses.
A choice of fruit plus a fruit and stuff like that.
And there's ones that will let you trade in for victory points. Because everything you do effectively gets you victory points. But this one these can also let you combo it. And also triggers the end of the game even faster.
And we also got to let everybody know, we just played with the basic rules. This was our first. There are advanced rules that do a couple other tricks as well.
Yeah, which we are going to be playing pretty soon. That was too simple, like the basic mode. But man, did it... It was good. Yeah. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I love that little puzzle pieces. We played another game right before that, or 2 games before, because we played Pack of Heroes right after, between the 2. Fast Loss, the Friedman Freeze racing game, and we really enjoyed that. But we're not even talking about it other than me mentioning it now, because how much we enjoyed Juicy Fruits.
Yeah, exactly. No, Juicy Fruits was amazing. And I didn't think it would be that good, but I saw the mechanism and I figured I would like this, how everybody has their own little puzzle to solve. And when you and I when we queued the end of the game, you queued it, we're like, all right, and you beat me by a single point. We both looked up, we're like, I would almost play this again right now.
Yeah, no, really if it wasn't for the fact that it was so late at night, we would have played it again.
Absolutely.
But I do have to say, it's not a super expensive game. It was, what, $40? Something like that? 50?
It was 40, 50, something like that. There's a lot of components.
Yeah, but amazing components. The cardboard's really nice. And the fruit, when we're talking about the fruit, these are chunky fruit, wood pieces. These things are massive. And so it's well produced. But then again, when you're getting a capstone game, that's what you're expecting from it.
Yeah, exactly. Good production, good art, and yeah, they had a nice, fancy tropical theme.
And a very interesting mechanism that I haven't seen too much in board games itself. No. Actually, I'd never really seen that with the sliding, and you get your resources through that. Mm-hmm. You're getting your resource and you're paying your resource. Yeah, that's fine. But the sliding and stuff was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. But yeah, that was my first one I wanted to talk about, Juicy Fruits.
All right, moving on to my next game, and my number 3 game that I'm going to talk about here, is a game that we've talked about before, but I actually showed it to some friends of ours, and I knew it would be a hit. I'm a big fan of small card games that can just pass some time, and we've talked about this one a lot, and that's Abandon All Artichokes. It went down like gangbusters. It was so good. They were like, oh, this is cute art. This is neat. And then we were playing it, and it's like, okay. And then my wife was like, and you know my wife, she likes those heavier, thinky games. Like Gloomhaven's one of her favorite games. Mm-hmm. And when she was playing it, she's like, okay, this is good. I like it. Because the whole point of the game is you're trying to get rid of your artichokes and draw up a hand of nothing but other vegetables. And it is so much fun. It plays pretty quickly. I think we finished it in 20 minutes, and that's with me teaching the game. Mm-hmm. And it went down so well. It was nice. It was a nice little calming game before we started playing some heavier games. And so, Abandon All Artichokes. That's a game right game. The only thing is, it comes in a tin.
And like a oddly shaped one, too.
Yeah, it's shaped like an artichoke. I actually have it in the office closet over here because I have nowhere else to put it. I keep my card games in a photograph case, and this way I could just pull them out when I'm going to take a few, and they're in the case. Like, I'm going to be going on a trip, hopefully, in October. We'll see how the way everything's going right now. Who knows? But I'm just going to grab a few and throw them in my carry-on bag.
Yep, makes sense. Next one I wanted to talk about was you brought it up briefly, and I decided to actually.
Oh, you did put it, okay?
Yep, I did. I changed out for one of the. I was originally going to talk about City of Gears, but then I decided that this is one that I really want to talk about. Fast Loss, the one that you and I played.
Okay.
And the reason I wanted to talk about this so much is because you are notorious for not liking Freedom and Freeze games. He is one of those.
One is because of your fault. We've talked about this before.
Right. We've told the story, but I mean I think you already had that stigma going into Freedom and Freeze games, where I love his ideas. His ideas are unique. They're refreshing. They don't always hit. You know, some games are a little wonky. Some aren't as fun. But when they do hit, like 504, it was okay. Like it was a cool idea.
I've played, I think, this would have been the 4th or 5th Freedom and Freeze game. Power Grid, we've already talked about the issues there. Futuropia, or whatever it's called. Not a fan of it. I also played Fear, that little card game. I did not like that one. And there was one other one. I think it was another one of the card ones.
Was it the
Fine Sand? That's what it was. Yeah.
Yes.
Wasn't a fan of that one either.
You might like. There was a fresh fruit or something like that. I forget what it was, but you're making drinks.
Yeah.
And you're bouncing around. It's like a worker placement, but it goes over a full storyline that adds in cards as you're evolving the game. So every time you play it, it's like the next chapter in the series of games, and so that's really neat. But that one's really fun.
Yeah, so I was very hesitant going into this one.
Yeah, very hesitant. But you were keeping an open mind, and so I brought it out, and you knew how much I wanted to play it.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well, I mean, if you don't like it, we'll put it away, fine, but let's give it a try. And I like these mechanisms of just, you're either drawing cards, then you're moving along, and you are not allowed to move your piece. Your sloth is lazy, and the idea is you're trying to eat 9 leaves that are throughout the board, 8 of the 9 leaves. And you can eat all of them if you are able to, but you're utilizing the animals that are on the board themselves and using movement cards to maneuver them around and carry your lazy butt to the other trees. And some of them are just simple. Like the unicorn can go over almost any terrain.
Yeah, but you can only use one of the unicorn cards.
One unicorn card, where all the other animals you can use, a
combination. Yeah,
the eagle can fly you up to 6 spaces across almost any terrain, but you have to use at least 6 movement of it.
Yeah.
The ants, you're trying to position them in a straight line, and they don't carry you, but they can propel you to the end of the line, as if they carry you for 1 movement point.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird. But the favorite one, and I think you already know which one it is.
Elephant?
Elephant, yes. The elephant moves really slow. It minuses 1 from your total movement.
And can't go in a lot of territory either.
Yeah, it only goes through a few territories. But when it stops, it throws you up to 3 spaces away. Which is hilarious. That's amazing.
I also like the crocodile because, one, you get a +1 movement. I mean, you're stuck to like the river and stuff like that. But I really enjoyed using the crocodile because I hope you get across a lot of those rivers.
Yeah, I know. I was using the donkey quite a bit. I don't think there was any animal that we didn't use. I know we used ants a lot.
We both used the eagle at least once. We both. I used the ants a couple times.
Donkey, elephant, and there was 6 total. So I'm sure
I did use the unicorn once as well.
Yeah. I used the crocodile for sure. So I think we used them all, which makes sense.
And that's also like the basic game. There's other animals in there that do some silly stuff too. And I have to say, this is the exception to the rule. Like, we did a topic about that a while ago.
Yep.
Where, for me, I'm not a fan of Friedman Freeze games. I've proven it. And it's not like I'm going in there going, you know what, I'll try it, see how it is. I'm being more open-minded about it.
Yeah.
But every Friedman Freeze game I played didn't hit. And this one, it's ugly as sin. It's got nice components, but it's a Friedman Freeze, so it's browns and greens everywhere.
Yeah. That sloth on the cover is just...
yeah.
I mean, it's cartoony, it's fun, but it's not
It was
pretty.
good, though. I did enjoy it.
Good deal. So if I were to bring over other Freedom and Freeze, where I said this is unique for whatever reason...
I'll try it, like I said.
You're probably going to be less begrudgingly.
No, because he's batting 1 out of 4, so...
1 out of 5.
Oh, yeah, he's batting 1 out of 5.
1 out of 5.
I was going to give him a 250 average.
So I need to...
He's down around like a 200. He's under the Mendoza line.
Ooh. So I got to bring over like at least 4 other pretty bad games. And then I'll find that next one where you're like, man, Freedom and Freeze just knocked it out of the park with this one.
When you go with low expectations, you'll be fully surprised.
Yeah. That's my number 2. Fast Sloths.
All right, going into my number 2. No, that was should have been
my number 3.
Yeah, going into my number 2 here is another one. Again, my next 2 games I didn't complete, but I played enough of it to understand if I'm going to like it or not. And the reason why we didn't complete this is that there was a issue with a buddy of mine who we were playing the game with. He had an issue at his home, so we had to just break it down and take off. And that's Disney Gargoyles: The Awakening. Most recent game that you can get at, I think it just came in at Target on around August 1st or so. One of the new ones that they come in.
From Ravensburger.
It, again, didn't get to finish it. And talking about well-produced games, we talked about Juicy Fruit and we talked about Fast Sloths. This one, for $30, is a very well-produced game. Mind you, it's also in Target, so that's an easier price point for them. But it's also a pain in the butt. And it's the buildings themselves. It's cool. It's a 3D map in a sense. You're putting up the buildings, and you have this little grid in there where you're moving, and there's spaces. You can go actually diagonal. It's one of the few games I own where when you're moving diagonal, you can go that way, you can go that way, you can go whichever way you want. But you have to break down the buildings every time. There's a few that can just stay built and go in your box, but you have to get rid of the insert, which I did. But the other ones have to be broken down. Like the big tower one has to be broken down the whole time. There's no way you can keep it in that box with everything else. And it gets a bit annoying when you're trying to mess with that finicky. But the game itself is really well. It's your simple co-op. You do some stuff, then bad things happen. And we'll talk about it later, but I like the fact that it does do some changes from other co-ops of that nature. And it's really good. I do want to play it more. I actually want to complete a game, but... we had a great time with it. What we did get to play, we did about 4 or 5 rounds before I think you showed up, and then the whole thing happened. And so we were like, okay, I'll break it down. We'll just go home. Really, really enjoyed it, though. Had a great time with it. And I was a big fan of the cartoon, so I'm excited that I actually own it.
Very cool. Yeah. I'd be curious to try it. I've never watched the cartoon. Never been a Gargoyle fan, but... Ravensburger they do hit it out of the park from time to time. I don't know who the designer is, though.
I can't remember the name. It's on the box. But it's not Prospero Hall or anything like that. In fact, the last 2 co-op Ravensburger games I got are not Prospero Hall.
For shame.
Because I got Aliens Fate of the Nostromo. I still need to play that one. Mm-hmm. And then Gargoyles. Haven't played... or I did just play that one, as I mentioned. But, none of those are Prospero Hall.
Speaking of not Prospero Hall... any other game that's not Prospero. I played Golden Ticket, the Willy Wonka game.
Another one. Speaking of Target, actually, another one
Target,
that you could get at Target
from Buffalo Games,
and I'm sitting there, okay, but not Phil Walker Harding.
Surprisingly enough.
Surprisingly, because the last two Buffalo games that you bought were Phil Walker Harding ones that you talked about.
Well, it's because I bought them because they were Phil Walker Harding, and then after realizing how good of production Buffalo is actually making
for price too.
For the price, yeah. So this game includes 60 plastic Wonka bars with a cardboard sheath over those, 5 plastic golden tickets. Excuse me. 5 plastic golden tickets, 6 custom meeples with stickers on them. They're shaped. One's Willy Wonka and the other are the 5 kids. Then you have about like 80 cards or so. Then you have mats for all those. Then you have a full thing of tokens that are 1 and 3 value for coin. And then you have a purple bag that keeps the coin tokens. Not used in the game, mind you. It's just, that's just how it carries it because they added the production. $20 from Target.
Yeah, and it looks nice. I've seen 2 different copies of it. Your copy and our mutual friend Bryce, who's been on the show with us, the Gamehead Geek over on TikTok. Mm-hmm. And it's really nice looking, but I've heard from both of you it's a pain in the butt to put together.
It's not too bad. I mean, it is. But once it's built, it's built. So each of them is like half of a tuck box. You know how the tuck box has like the little part that like folds inward?
Yeah.
It has that on one side, and the other side is completely empty because you just slide the chocolate bars in.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
No, I get that.
And functionally, it does work. I don't know how much it'll be before it wears out, but we'll see. But no, the idea of this game is
that's
card
been our
play.
thing about Buffalo games is that they're good. We just don't know how long it's going to be to wear out. You said the same thing about summer camp, and you had issues with Tetris as well.
Yep. And so it's a wonderful game that I liked it quite a bit. You know, it has its flavor it's like a family weight Istanbul. Because what you're doing is you're either discarding a card to move up, down, left, or right 1 space, and then take the action that's on the space itself, which is stuff like trade cards or money in for like Wonka bars or more cards or extra movement or special actions, whatever. And then, or you could play the card for their action and you place them below your board. What makes this different than most games like that sounds almost like a take that game
in a
all
sense,
of a sudden. Yeah. But no, what you're doing is the cards that you play, you can take 2 actions on your turn. And let's say I play like two different kind of candy. There's sweets, there's rowdy cards, and there is wild cards, I think, that have Wonka hats on them. Those are the 3 categories. And there's a mechanism in this game called sweeping, where basically you take the ones that you had played below you, and you then discard them. Okay. But what you've previously played, you can sweep for points or Wonka bars. So, for example, like there's one spot where it says, sweep 1, 2, 3, or 4 rowdy cards, and then take that many Wonka bars.
Okay.
So if I've only previously played 3, I can sweep those for the action. Dump. Just all you're doing is discarding it. You've already played them for their special action.
Okay.
And then you take that many Wonka bars. Now here's what makes it interesting. Let's say there's 5 players. You play with 1 fewer golden ticket than the number of players. And as long as you get at least 1 golden ticket, you win. The rules do say that if you want to play friendly, and if you get an additional golden ticket, you choose who you give it to. I say keep it because that's funny.
Yeah.
And so yes, it could be the fact that we might play a 4-player game, and you and the other 2 players might get a single Wonka bar, but those are the ones with golden tickets, and I get everything else, and I get nothing, and I lose. And yes, that stings because technically I lost. But then you could just say, "Oh, I have the moral victory. I had all these Wonka bars. Clearly, I played better." But still, that's amazing.
Yeah, no. What's funny about it, now that you mentioned it, I was watching on TikTok. There's a guy on there called Plumpy Thimple, and he has a skit that he does where he plays Death, and he's playing this game. Yep. And so the Death character had all the Wonka bars, and he had the one that had the golden ticket in it. So it made me giggle, and I'm like, yeah, I can see why people like this one. It's simple. Yeah. It's not as strategic as some of the bigger games you see on the shelf behind me, but it's fun.
Yeah, it's a good gateway. But there is one huge problem with it, and I bet you can guess what it is since it's Buffalo Games.
The card stock?
The cards. You can't you have to like peel them up. Like you can't like spread them. You can't even deal them normally.
Oh man.
They it's like trying to deal sheets of paper. You can't do it. It's so difficult because there's no plastic finish, there's no linen finish, no air cushion, what Bicycle has, nothing. It's like just sheets of thick paper. And I'm going to sleeve it. I'm going to buy some purple sleeves for it.
Well,
but I'm not okay with that.
You have to do that a lot for a lot of Buffalo games. I have to do it for summer camp, and we talked about it last week. It's just like, it's a deck builder. Your main thing is going to be the cards.
Yeah.
Why are the cards so bad? So, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I almost want to like give them a call because I have their number clearly, and say, hey, look, everything you're doing is fantastic. I would be willing to pay another like $5 to $10.
Yeah, just make the cards better.
The cards just have a plastic coating.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Their cardboard stuff works really well. Just make the cards slightly better. Mm-hmm. Just give me a better stock. You don't even have to give it linen finish. Just give it a better stock. These cards are, for me, like almost on equivalency of like Hasbro cards.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good comparison. It's like trying to deal out the... No, I bet even the Monopoly properties are better. But dealing out the money...
I have Rick and Morty Clue down there because my wife's a Rick and Morty fan and it was gifted to her. Mm-hmm. And when I was putting it together and, putting it for I could keep it on the shelf, unwrapping and stuff, the card stock just made me sad. And that's what I remind when I start messing with the Buffalo games or Summer Camp. I love that game. I showed it to some friends as well. I've showed it to everybody I possibly can for that game.
Yep.
And the card stock still makes me sad. I'm going to have to put sleeves on it just because this game is going to get that wear and tear. Because if anybody says, hey, what's a deck builder? Or introduce me to a deck builder. That's my go-to.
That makes sense. Mine's probably still Star Realms.
I think because of the simplicity and the interesting theme, because nobody's going to be offended by Summer Camp, really.
No.
Compared to, some people might not like sci-fi. And yeah, you got Hero Realms, but some people might not like fantasy, so...
Yeah, that makes sense. But that's my number 2, Golden Ticket, the Willy Wonka game.
All right, moving on to my number 1 game, and it's another one that you and me played, but we didn't get to finish. We did play quite a bit of this game, and we were actually getting near one of the major points of the game where the merge was supposed to happen with the last players. But we both had to end up leaving that night because, mind you, it was already, almost 10?
Something like that.
Yeah, and there was probably still another 30 minutes or so left in the game, but we had to call it. And that is Ankh. It's the most recent Simon, Come On, whatever you want to say, game out there, and it's the third of the pseudo trilogy that is known as the Eric Lang
Simon trilogy.
Yeah, the Simon trilogy. I don't know the name, and it's funny because we've had a big discussion about this trilogy and about the definitions of it, and fine. I consider it a trilogy. I have no issue with that. It's just that
we just don't know why.
Yeah, we don't know why it's a trilogy because they don't for me. We were talking about how I said Gloomhaven is a trilogy, and they were like, no, because Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lions plays exactly the same as Gloomhaven, and Frosthaven going to play similar. But I'm like, yeah, but they still add to the story. It's like you're saying the prequel Star Wars movies don't do anything different compared to the Star Wars original series, yet they're part of the same saga. And then you also got to throw in the founders of Gloomhaven too, which ties into it as well.
Yeah.
But going back to Ankh, I don't know how I feel about this one, honestly. I did enjoy myself. I do like the game. Mm-hmm. But when I'm talking about, and you can see Rising Sun behind me and Blood Rage on the shelf next to it, between those two games, there you go. Between those two games, when I played both of those, it gripped me. I really enjoyed the drafting mechanism in Blood Rage. I really love the actual combat in Rising Sun, and then the working during the tea ceremony, making alliance, and deciding if now is a good time to break the alliance, or when you're making your decisions throughout the game. Those two really grasped me and made me really get into the game. And Ankh sort of did, but where in those two games, you're playing as clans, in a sense, and you're getting the Shinto and Rising Sun and the gods and Blood Rage to work for you. In this one, you're the actual gods who want to not be forgotten. So you're actually drawing in the faithful to remember you and fight for you and stuff like that. And I get it. It's cool, but it doesn't grasp me as well as the other two. And the mechanism itself is basically action selection. Mm-hmm. And it's fine, but it just... I like drafting more, and I love the whole package of Rising Sun more than Ankh. I did enjoy it. It's wonderfully produced, especially for when you're talking about a Kickstarter from CMON. It's going to be one of the best produced games out there. It's just regardless, especially if you get the Kickstarter one with how all the exclusivities and all that from it. I do need to play it some more just to see how I really feel and where it sits for me. But right now, out of the three, it's my least favorite.
Yeah. I haven't played Blood Rage. That's the only one I have. I haven't played Rising Sun yet. I liked it. I like what it did. I felt like... I honestly felt the biggest deterrent from that game. The only bad thing I would really say about it is I thought it was overproduced for what the game was. I thought that game...
Yeah, I could see that. That might be why it wasn't...
simpler.
Yeah, it wasn't grasping me, is because, yeah, it's cool. This is what you expect from CMON, but it didn't fit for what we were doing.
Yeah, like
this could be simple, smaller minis or pawns or whatnot.
And Kickstarter makes CMON makes an amazing production, and I'm fine with that. But like, have you ever played like lawn chess?
Yeah,
like where you have like the big 1.5 foot tall or 2 foot tall pieces, but you're playing chess. Did that really increase increase the value?
Or Cracker Barrel with the giant checkers?
Yeah, it's like, is that much better? I mean, maybe.
Yeah, no.
I mean, I don't know. It's just, it seemed like it was too small of a game for what they were doing. And I thought I was taken away by that.
In the fact that
the game was fine.
Board felt small with all the minis, in all honesty, and I get it because they push for the play mats, and so our mutual friend didn't get the play mat because, mind you, it was already an expensive Kickstarter to begin with. Yeah. And but so I get it. It's just those minis made the play mat feel small. You know what it kind of reminded me of, and it's just another CMON game, is what is that game called? The Cthulhu one from CMON. Death May Die.
Death May Die, yeah.
Where the minis are great, but then you have this modular board, and the board pieces are hitting my mic again, that big.
We apologize.
They're not that large. And so just the whole thing gets swarmed. And it kind of fits for that because you're getting overwhelmed by the creatures from Death May Die. But this one, you're fighting over territory. You're trying to become the one with the most faith and stuff like that. And it just it feels tight, but not in a way a game should feel tight when it's battling. It feels like there's just...
cumbersome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, the game was fine. No knocks on the actual mechanisms or the game itself. I think it's a solid game. But it's just... I don't know. I was fine playing that. I play so many underproduced games that this was a to play something that's overly produced.
It's weird to play an overproduced game where we talked about it not too long ago. We were talking. I can't remember what game it was. It's like they could have done a little something more with what they had here. Yep. Don't give me these generic pawns. At least give me meeples. And this one, we're like, there's just too much plastic for the small board.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. When you have a piece that's like 1/2 foot tall, and then it's like the hex that's just slightly bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was something different. But Ankh was cool. And we're gonna give a shout out to Creative Chaos. Thanks for joining us. My last one that I wanted to talk about was a game called Dive. Have you heard anything about this game?
The only thing I've heard about it is our mutual friend keeps saying that you want to play it so bad, and
every time I saw him, he would say, "Danny, you're gonna like this. I think you're gonna like this." And then one of the last game nights, it was nice and slow, and everybody was ready. It's like, all right, everyone's on autopilot. And then he brought it out, and he just gave me that look from across the room. Huh? It's like, okay. All right. It's like, how long does it play? It's like 15, 20 minutes. Okay, let's try it. So the idea of Dive is you're basically trying to bid on sea life. Either turtles, which are red or green turtles, which is one flaw because they're a little hard to see, but because they're kind of faded. Or I think starfish, or no, manta rays. You can get points if you're not the leader, so they're kind of like a catch-up mechanism. But there's also sharks to be aware of. You want to bid accurately on sharks. So the idea is you can bid up to 5 levels, and the levels are made up of these clear plastic sheets that are about 8 by 8 foot or 8 by 8. 8 by 8 inches or so. Mm-hmm. And have you ever had like a clear deck of cards? Like, have you ever seen those, like, where you can't actually see through all of them?
The invisible cards? I have a, like, set right there behind you on the...
Look, may I borrow those real quick? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so, if you look at this, and this will be for the
video,
Yep, video listeners only. If I hold up these invisible cards, yes, each one is individually transparent, but if I hold up a pack of them, this is only like half of the deck, you can't see behind it. That's because each layer adds just a little bit more blurriness.
Yeah.
Well, that's the mechanism in the game, is the idea is that they are all clear blue sheets with these images on them.
Yeah.
And it gives you the sense of looking down into the ocean, because the more sheets you look through, the more faded they are. And that's what's interesting. That's what makes the game really stand out, is because you're trying to guess up to 5 levels at a time. Or is that on the same level as this? Is that turtle on the top level? And each of the images are also partly transparent themselves, so you can see through it. And then some of the levels are really great. Some of them have like a giant whale that's just right in the middle of it, covering up everything. Some of them have bubbles where they actually cut out part of the plastic, and it's an empty like circle that's bubble shaped, and so it doesn't give you that effect, but you know it's there because you can see the edges of it. And there's other sea life. There's like schools of fishes and stuff. It's so fun. And so you have tokens numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
And the idea is that on each of the levels, you can put as many of the tokens as you want, and you put them on either the shark or the not shark side. So, for example, let's say the first level, I'm confident that there's like 2 turtles on it.
Yeah.
I might bid kind of high. I might say like I have like bid of 5, a 5 and a 2, and hoping that nobody outbids me. But then after we've bid all those levels going top down, we see whoever gets the highest, and whoever was correct, then they score the points if they bid the highest. So whatever points the turtles would be, 1 or 2 points. But if you're ever wrong, you're done for the dive.
Oh.
So you don't get to keep guessing, even if you were right. So as soon as you get one wrong, because then you also get 1 point on how far down you delved. So if you spread out all of them evenly, you probably won't get points for actually guessing what animals are on it.
But you get some points for going deep.
For going deep, yeah. And so it's super neat. It's so brilliant. It has no right being as fun as it is.
My question, do you think I would like it?
Yes. I really do. There's something so unique about it, and it's not just a gimmick. It works really well.
It's not like we need more water games between Dive and Aquatica and Ocean.
And this is the time. This is the time when the ocean games are finally
starting
here.
to hit. Yeah,
Dive is a very welcome, interesting idea. I've not seen it before. I think it's brilliant.
Speaking of that game night, and it sounds pretty cool. I need to play it. Kind of sad I didn't make it to the last one because the theme was IP. I just totally forgot. We were outside dealing with weeds and stuff like that all week.
I'm going to tell you a quick story.
And as you can see behind me, I got a lot of IP games.
You got a lot of IP games. There one of our patrons who comes to the shop very often. We'll probably give him a shout out later. He runs his own YouTube channel too. But he brought a Lego game. And at first I was like, what? He was like, you've never heard of this, because nobody has. And he brought it out, and it's like a 2-player resource management game where the resources are your Legos at your building, and you have like the pieces inside of a pod, and you could buy different pods and different different, like, you have different card plays. There was a video game designer who created the game Quantum.
Okay.
It's a board game called Quantum. It's a dice game. He was the original designer for this Lego board game long before like the Lego board games that you're familiar with, like the Dungeon Crawl one and the Roll and Move and all that stuff. This was completely unique. Our friend brought up a very...
I actually have a Lego one down there.
Yeah.
I have the Harry Potter one.
Right, and it's probably okay.
It's not bad. I enjoyed it.
This seemed like a legitimately fun game, regardless of whether it was Lego or not. It's so crazy. I'll have to show you it later, but that blew my mind when he showed me it. He was like, you need to see this. I'm going to get some people to play it. I'm like, do it, because I want to see that.
So when I was talking to the wife about it, I'm like, I can't believe I missed it. That would have been my perfect one. And I counted. Mm-hmm. I have 38 IP games.
Wow. I think I brought almost all of the ones I own.
And in fact,
And
I think
like maybe 10 or 15.
I miscounted. I have 39 because if you notice that, I don't know if you can see it very well, but the Aliens deck builder, I have Predator in that same box.
Okay.
Legendary.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so I was like, that would have been mine.
Right.
The Aliens, the Gargoyles. You can see behind me, I have Star Trek Panic right behind your head. Star Wars Rising. If that
I brought
was Rising.
my copy of Star Trek Panic. It's so good.
Horrified, Goonies.
Yep.
Just everything above your head except for Pan Am really is IP, and Pan Am's kind of IP as
Pan
well.
Am absolutely is intellectual property. It's just not media.
No, but I don't think it is intellectual property unless they, got the rights because the TV show.
No, now it is.
Yeah.
Because they made a board game from it.
Well, not just that. They also had a TV show off of Pan Am as well.
Did they really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Is the game based off of the
No, it's
TV
based
show?
off the old Pan Am, which is funny because speaking of Pan Am, we played it, right? And just recently, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then I watched Blade Runner not too long after we played it for the first time, and they have advertisements for Pan Am. And then I followed that up with the most recent Blade Runner, 2049, I think is what it was. And they still have ads for or Pan Am because they wanted to stay consistent because there was such a big stretch between the sequel.
Yeah, that's pretty great. I'm not going to lie. Okay, cool. So now, shall we get into the actual discussion topic?
We will in a sec. I just want to make mention as well to let everybody know about the update that I will be starting work soon. So we don't know exactly what the recording schedule is soon, but we're going to be able to work it out because we're not that far apart now. So as you can see, we can record together. So once I get my schedule nailed down, we'll figure out what our new recording schedule will be.
Cool deal. All right.
So you want to tell the people what our topic is?
Yeah. So for once, we used to just kind of have a list where it's like, yeah, let's think of 8 games that meet this criteria. But we try to do something different. We want to talk about actual game theory today. Mm-hmm. And we've used the term good and bad games. I know I've used that. It's like, oh, this is a bad game for this reason. And we've used it in our top 8 debates. We've used this in other discussion points. But then we got in some pretty heated discussions about, like, well, what makes a game good bad or bad?
And this comes back from when just us most recently bringing up a topic that we were talking about during the top 8 debate, or our fight over Looping Louie.
Yes.
And you had a mutual friend of ours explain it to better what we said, and I think we talked about it in the last podcast as well.
We'll give a shout out to that episode. If you haven't seen the video games that should be made into board games, our friend Jim, he's a brilliant person, and I'm going to steal a lot of his arguments because he really did give me a lot of those. No, he studied video games and game theory more than I have, and he brought up some really solid points. And it wasn't until his argument that we were sitting there playing in a group, Loopin' Louie, and I was like, man, this game is so fun, I love this. And then I asked him, so let me ask you a question. In your opinion, do you think this game is good or bad? And he said, well, in what context? I was like, because me and Daniel have argued about it, that context. I said, he says it's a bad game. I say it's a good game because it's skill-based. And he had a very good counter-argument for it. And that in other skill-based games, and Pool kind of falls in this category.
Yeah.
If you have the ability, by using skill, to completely prevent another player from even taking a turn, he thinks that is functionally a bad game. Whereas, say, in something like chess, if I'm playing against a grandmaster, I'm definitely going to lose.
Yeah.
It's kind of pointless for me to play. Mm-hmm. But that is not a design fault in the game. That is just simply, I am not to that
There's a skill level, yeah.
And and to prove that point even more, no matter how bad I am compared to the good player, I still get the opportunity to move my pieces.
Yeah.
I still have every chance. I don't have any way that is preventing me from being as good as the other player other than my skill. And that was the counter argument that he made. That was, no offense, Daniel. It was just way more eloquent. You've spoken with, our friend. You know exactly what we're talking about. And Lupin Louie unfortunately falls in that line where if someone is skilled enough, they could hit a perfect move every time and actually prevent other players from playing.
Mm-hmm. And which was my argument, and that you were...
and I stand by my reasoning in that I don't think... I still think that if you're overly skilled, that's not a problem with the game. But if the game design...
Because if you're the first player, basically, and the other person cannot take an entire turn at all throughout the entire game, right, what's the point of me playing?
Well, agreed, but let's say bowling. Let's say I bowl a perfect 300 every time, right? And
yeah, but that's fine, because I can still bowl.
Still do it, right. And so I think where it boils down to is that the game design, the determination on if that game is good or bad is not the level of skill of the players. It's how well it allows the player to, if it allows all players to have a chance to play.
Yeah.
And I'm already getting into the list because that is a huge thing.
Yeah, no, it is, and I agree completely with what he was saying, because it's basically better way I said it. That's really what it is.
Much better. Agreed.
I am not as eloquent as him. Okay. Yeah. You get me flustered where I want to beat you with my physical hands, not my words.
You argue with these. Oh goodness. So we've came up with some reasons. I have 4 things that I think make a good game, 4 things that make a bad game.
And I didn't go that route. I went with, because some of them are what makes a bad game, some of them are what makes a good game. But there's a couple that kind of cross over, where if this happens, it could either if it's done well, it could make it a good game. If it's done badly, it could make it a bad game.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want me to start on this one? Because I actually have a good beginning point.
Sure.
And that's because our friend Creative Chaos brought up in the comments. She said the game can't adapt to counter that issue, but then up above that, you also explained exactly, and games are supposed to be fun, right? Mm-hmm. It makes it a bad time for the other players, and I think that's one of the biggest things. A game I can say can almost be a good game for any person who thinks that it's fun.
Yeah.
If it's a fun theme, or if it's a fun mechanism, it would be a good experience, and therefore will make it better than a bad game.
Yeah. I get that.
And the best example I have of that is I played a game called Astron. And Astron is a game from the 1950s, and I played this.
Random.
This is really what brought this conversation on. And I played this with gamers who are the heaviest Euro gamers.
We did do the discussion topic before we started.
We haven't. We'll go back into that. You're right. I'm gonna pause right there, and we're gonna ask the viewers what they thought.
I'm like staring right at it. I'm like, we didn't even get started on that.
So we asked this to our Facebook group. Not our Facebook group, the Board Game Revolution group. And we asked this earlier today, so we don't have too many comments, but go ahead and give us a start.
Nicholas said, is everyone having fun? It's good. Even though it's a flawed concept, because everyone's concept of fun is subjective, to him, Too Many Bones is his number 1 favorite game of all time, while he's met people who can't stand the game. And this is a very subjective list. This is what we believe makes a game good or bad, in our opinion. But from anything I put, you might have a counter argument for it, and that's fine, and vice versa. It's just something that is open for discussion, and that's what we want to talk about, is just what makes it. And then now that he's within reaching range, I mean, my fist is, just a good size of your jaw right there.
Yeah, give or take. Yeah, no, it exactly. It's a very subjective thing, but I mean that kind of proves the point. And I agree with him. I actually really disliked Too Many Bones when I played it.
Yeah, you've mentioned it before.
And because I really disliked it. It wasn't fun for me. But I get the appeal of why people do like it. It's just, I don't like the game itself. I don't think it's a very good game, which for reasons I'll explain later. Nicholas says, easy to learn, a joy to play, can be solo or multiple players is good. Convoluted rules and references, fiddly bits, and needless fluff. To bloat a box is bad.
We were just kind of talking about that about Thonk earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, with Ankh is a really great example. We feel that it's a smaller game than it should feel. This is just other players, if you like honk, awesome.
Yeah, no.
You know, you have every right to.
And I didn't hate it. I really enjoyed
it. For some reason, it felt like it should have been a smaller game than what it was.
Yeah, no. I agree.
And I don't know how to even quantify that. Creative Chaos laughed at the term fiddly bits.
Shannon says, I think for me, it needs to be a balance of good strategy, great art, and fun to play with anyone. It makes the game great. I think if just one of this is missing, it's a miss for me. Simplistic, I know.
Yep. And Rex said, great player interaction, flawless game mechanics, easy to teach and learn. Last option, which would be a plus, honestly, is player count. This is why a lot of party games are fun/good. The only problem for those is that they require a high player count to be fun.
Yeah, see, I have an argument against that. Party games are expected to be fun. They're not expected to be great. I wouldn't say Time's Up is a great game, but it's a lot of fun.
It's very fun, yeah.
Yeah, and another one that you like to pull out at the shop all the time, Concept. It's not the best game in the world, but it's still fun to play. I remember you showing it to a group of teenagers, I think, 14, 15, younger teenager side.
Probably.
And they had fun, and you were showing it to them, and you showed me what their thing was, and I was sitting there like, that's way before their time, because you're talking about like movies and
Frankenstein.
No,
right?
It was Werewolf.
Werewolf. You would think that 15-year-olds would know Werewolf, but it shows how old I am. Apparently.
Exactly.
I thought that was like common knowledge. I thought that was in the lexicon.
No, you have to be a fan to search for that, because they're in the generation where werewolves to them was through Twilight, and so and they're teenage boys. They're not gonna admit
they're not gonna watch Twilight. No, that's fair. So, yeah, thank you for everybody who commented. Going back to my point, Astron, and this goes back to that. So I was playing this game. Let me give you a context. It was in a game room that was designed to be. It's like a little mini house in the back of his yard, right? And it has like its own bathroom, its own little bedroom, and
so basically they made a tiny house for board gaming.
Yes, that is absolutely it. And there was multiple tables for groups, and there was one big, like bar height, massive gaming table that could fit 8 people easily. 4 per side. It was a square. Excuse me. And these guys are the kind of guys where you play Power Grid with them, and they will have it down to the dollar, and they have the ability to strategize, and they play the really heavy Euros and the heavy economic simulator games, and they love how competitive they can be because they are such on that same level. I was never up to their level. And then one day, the main gentleman, his name is Kevin, he brought out Astron from the 1950s. And I think the only reason he kept it is because it's an antique and it's valuable.
Yeah.
But the idea of this game is you have a massive scroll of paper that has a grid. You're flying around the world, and then eventually you launch a rocket into the moon. But you're on a rocket, right?
Yeah.
And so this paper scroll has 2 wood dowels on both sides, and the box is made up of this clear plastic layer that has a grid on it, and that's the spaces that you're on the board. You can't leave that grid.
Okay.
But all you do on your turn is play a card from your hand, which will say like move forward 3 spaces or move back 2 spaces or left or right. And then sometimes it'll have you move the board itself, where everybody kind of grabs one of the sides and you start scrolling the board underneath that plastic sheet. And the idea is there's spots on this map where there are, destinations where you're trying to land, and then you draw victory point cards, and so the victory point cards are random, so you don't know. It's anywhere from like 1 to 5 points. And then there's bad parts like hurricanes and stuff that you're trying to avoid, obviously, which you get negative point cards for. They're called hazards. And part of the game is playing a card. It's like, I'm going to move the map 3 spaces. Oh, look, you're 3 spaces behind a hazard. Oh, well, and then you throw other people into the hazards, and all of these really heavy gamers and myself, we were just giggling the whole time. We're like, this is just ridiculous, and we counted up the points at the end, and I don't have a slightest clue of who won. I don't remember, because we didn't care.
Yeah, if you have fun with it, then it's not a bad game.
And I appreciated what he said the most. As soon as he picked up the game, we all had smiles. And he said, this was made back in the day when games weren't intended to be good. They were intended to be fun.
Yeah.
And that really struck a chord with me, and I think that's what really kind of came up with this concept. If, regardless of how good or bad a game is, it becomes good.
Now who's punching
if
their
it is
mic?
Fun, right? It becomes good if it's fun for people.
Yeah. That's why it's so subjective.
A good game for kids, apples to apples. Is it actually a good game? No, it's a terrible game. But is it good for kids? It teaches them counting.
Yeah.
That's good. And the kids have fun putting little cherries in the cups.
We'll talk about apples to apples a little bit later.
Yeah. But that's an idea, right?
Yeah.
It's fun for the audience that it's intended for. So that's my first one, is I think fun upgrades a game.
No, and I get that. I agree with you. Well, like I said, we'll talk about to apples a little bit. For one of my first choices here, and this is what makes a game good, it's something we talk about all the time, and it's one of the reasons in our top 8 debate. Mm-hmm. And it's in the game immersion category. And it's theme matching the mechanism. If you can merge the mechanism to the actual theme that's painted on, it could just enhance an already good game. So, case in point, viticulture. You do feel like you're a winery. You're building your farm, your fields with your grapes. You're going out there and you're smashing them, making them into wine. You're putting them in the cellars to age them. You're selling them. You're trying to meet requirements. You give wine tastings as part of the game as well. And so when you merge the theme with the mechanism, it enhances it. Another game that I'm going to talk about is Western Legend. You do feel like you're an outlaw or a sheriff and you're living in the Wild West. And everything in that game, even though it's a sandbox game, really fits. Like anything you've seen on TV. You can play poker. You've seen that a lot in a Western movie. You can shoot bandits. You've seen that a lot in Western movies and stuff like that. You can be a sheriff and go after the outlaw players, or a deputy for the sheriff and do stuff like that. When you blend the mechanisms of the game to the actual theme, and we've talked about it in our top 8 debates, sometimes I'll say a deterrent for a game is that it's just mechanistic. You can put any theme on it and it works. Case in point, The Crew. I really like The Crew. I think it's a great game. But the theme barely comes out.
Yeah, no.
Barely. To the point where they have one in space, and now they're going to have one where it's underwater.
Yep.
And it makes sense both ways. But when you can blend
any Stefan Feld game just doesn't have...
Yeah, it's point salad for a reason. That's why Stefan Feld is the king of point salads. It's there to make points, and there's a theme. Yeah. But I'm talking about like Western Legends, Viticulture. Heck, Gloomhaven as a dungeon crawler really fits its mechanisms really well. Mm-hmm. And so when you get that blending, that feel, that love, it just makes a game and enhances it so much better.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's actually my next one, is Immersive Theme. Mm-hmm. I think, no matter how fantastical or absurd the theme is, if the mechanisms allow you to portray that theme, that's huge. That makes it a good game.
Yeah.
And so, for example, I know pancakes are not technically sweets, but I'm going to use them as this example. There is a game called from Renegade Games called Ice Cream Split or Sundae Split.
Yeah.
And it's an ice split you choose thing where you're getting different toppings of ice cream. And that works, but that doesn't make sense. Like, imagine me putting out a bunch of bowls in front of you. Like, here's the toppings.
Yeah.
You choose a few. Like, here's the ones you can get. There's the ones I can get. Like, that's a little odd. But then, on the flip side of it, I have a game called Yum Yum Pancakes or something like that, where you have all these, like, plastic pancake pieces, and they have toppings, but the way you flip over the tokens is you put them in a plastic little frying pan, and whoever's flipping flips the tokens, physically flips them, and they all and some of them some fly out of the pan, some actually do flip.
Until you play with an actual chef who's like,
yeah, who's really good at it and flips them all over in one go, Yeah, it's really fun how it works. But then at that point, it's just a memory game, and I pick one up. It's like, oh, what topping is this? And you just guess.
Yeah,
that makes it less of a good game. But that initial part of the flipping the pancakes, amazing.
No, I agree.
That turns it into a dexterity game, and that part of the game is great.
Yeah, no, and it goes with what I was saying about like the theme matching, the mechanism, or immersive games. When you can get into it, and this is the reason why it's a category in our top 8 debate. If you can get into the game, it's going to make you have a great time.
The new form of Pogs, yeah.
Yeah, it is the new form of Pogs. I don't know where my Pogs are. I have them somewhere around here.
I have a tournament set for Pogs. If you ever want to throw down,
I have a X-Men set of Pogs, and they're still sealed in their bag because I won them at a RPG day for having like one of the most famous deaths. Because I was the only one at the table that rolled a 1.
Wow. I actually have one of those the Magic 8-Ball slammers. The that everyone wanted. Like the Cadillac of slammers, if you will.
I don't know. I didn't really want the 8-Ball. I had the Cadillac of slammers that I wanted. It was it was a Batman slammer that was pure heavy.
Okay.
Everybody kept trying to steal my slammer.
I'd believe that. Anybody likes Batman. We are off topic. Holy cow. But yeah, immersive theme.
Crit of Chaos brought up Pogs, and that kind of threw us off. So my next one here kind of goes with what we were talking about just now recently, and that's engagement. This can make a game good or bad, being engaged in the game throughout the entire game. And this can go with like analysis paralysis and stuff like that as well. Yep. But if the game, like Quacks and Quedlinburg is a good one, where even though you're not engaged in your turn, it's not your turn, you're just watching someone else pull, you're still engaged in the game because you're trying to encourage the other player to keep pulling, and I'll pull if you pull, and that kind of stuff. Sure. Or another good one is Space Base. Space Base keeps you engaged on everybody's turns, and it goes quickly, and it moves fast. If it's 4 minutes before my next turn, I'm gonna check out. So if a game doesn't have something to keep you engaged in the game, inherently, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a bad game, but it's not going to make it great. I just mentioned 2 really good games where you're engaged the entire time you're playing through, and one of them, when you're not even taking a turn, you're engaged. Well, you kind of are because you're doing it together, but you're egging each other on, kind of thing. And in Space Base, you have to because you get rewarded from other players' stuff, as well as watching Coral in a sense when you can get if they roll a number for one of your red buildings. But if you're engaged on other people's turns, I mentioned it earlier, Gloomhaven's another one. When you're going through the initiative, so you're really engaged throughout the game because you're trying to figure out how you're going to move your character and fight and argue or do whatever you got to do in the game. And if Joe Schmo plays a higher initiative than you and it could wipe your entire turn, you got to communicate, you got to engage. Okay, let me go after this guy, but you also have hidden information. But it keeps you engaged, it keeps you invested, and that's a big thing about with one of the reasons for it being a good game. We've played some Euro games where in a 5-player game or a 4-player game, and we've talked about it. I still enjoy the game, but Argent, where there's 4 minutes between my turn if you're playing a full contingency, I'm going to check out. Even though I have my turns figured out, I'm just like, you know what, things are going to change. And if I'm not engaged, I'm going to check out. I'm going to watch the hockey game that I got on the TV in the background or something like that. So engagement makes the game important and playable.
And, and that's going to go into one of my next one is streamlined. If a game is streamlined, and that... I feel like I do agree with you with the engagement, but I feel like a game can be engaging without having to require player interaction. And what I mean by that is like Ticket to Ride is a beautiful example of that. The turns happen so fast that you don't have the time to lose that focus. Yeah. You could think it's like, all right, well, I have these cards. Oh, it's my turn. Oh, wow, okay. I'll take these cards. Okay. So then if I build that route, oh, it's my turn again. Okay. And we got that with Juicy Fruits yesterday. Juicy Fruits, you and I wasn't finished with my turn. I would be like, all right, well, I got these fruits and I'm going to buy this and you're already shifting because the game just goes that fast.
Yeah, no. And I agree with you. And again, it goes to what I just said with the engagement too. It's if it's streamlined and fast enough, yeah, I get that. It does make a good game. And we've talked about it. I enjoyed Great Western Trail and where there's some rules issues and stuff like that. But I agree with you. We played a couple Fisters, and he just doesn't seem that streamlined that we would like.
No, he's definitely not. And it's a bog to play it, and which, I think that any good game needs a level of streamlinedness. And then I know it's not a real term, but if it's clunky, like how one of our commenters was saying, it does take you out of that game. And even if it's a game that's a high interactive game, if let's say... Bonanza is a great example. Bonanza has amazing player interaction because you're constantly wheeling and dealing. You're constantly figuring out what's in your hand. You're engaged on every player. But if for some reason, Bonanza, it almost never happens. But if I see two cards out there that I don't care about in the slightest, well, I'm going to sit back, and if that wheeling and dealing takes too long,
yeah, you're going to check out.
Then I'm going to check out. So, I mean, that's why I think being streamlined helps out a lot. Is, the game mechanisms themselves create you that opportunity to never be tired. So, like, Settlers of Catan is one example of it, where, like, you first roll the dice.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's engaged because you're all, let's get these resources, let's get these. And then the very next thing that happens, all right, anybody want to trade? No? Yeah? Let's deal. Okay. No, I'll give you a wood if you don't give him that,
Exactly.
And then once you're done with the wheeling dealing, it's like, cool. All right, I have what I need. Boom, 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 boom. Next player's turn all of a sudden.
And it works. Immersive. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, but that's mine. I think being streamlined is one of the most important things for a game.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. And so moving on to my next one, and I told you I was going to bring up Apples to Apples, and this is where it's at. And this for me this can make a bad game, and that's a clone. What I'm talking about here is if you're cloning a game and don't change, and I'm not talking about rethemes. I'm talking about like if you Apples to Apples to Cards Against Humanity kind of thing. If you play exactly the same way and don't make it your own. Cards Against Humanity has done it. I don't like the game all that much, but it's basically Apples to Apples for adults.
It is exactly that. Yeah.
But I'm talking about something like Sorry and Parcheesi. They play a lot of alike, and Sorry just is nowhere as good as Parcheesi is.
Yeah.
And so when you're not adding something to the game or the mechanism or however you're doing it, you're just straight up cloning it and saying, oh, we can get around this because you can't really copyright mechanisms. We'll just put a slap on another thing on it and it plays exactly the same. It just shoots in ladders in Candyland.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring up the term that I always use for games like this, the magic butts.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that's probably what you thought of when you were thinking of this, or at least one of them. Like
was one, yeah.
I've used that term before, where immediately if you hear, it's like, oh, well, how does your two-player card game work? Well, it's like Magic, but and then you immediately, no, I already know how to play Magic. Why do I need...
Yeah, if you're not adding something new, then why don't I just go play the original? Yeah. Like, I'm not going to play Sorry. I'll play Parcheesi. If you do
play something new, like, what's even if it is new, it's like, okay, like this one, but it doesn't use mana. It uses dice instead. Cool, but... I already have Magic.
Yeah.
And that's not a big enough change. That is a clone as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about here is just, like, what do you make it your own? Like, Apples to Apples and Cards Against Humanity is a big one that we talked about. It's just that Cards Against Humanity plays exactly like Apples to Apples, just adult theme. That's really it, and it's gross out humor and stuff like that. And I understand why it's popular.
Yeah, it's silly. It's funny.
Yeah, it's a party game. We mentioned party games don't have to be good, but I don't find it fun. And I don't find Apples to Apples fun either, and they don't do anything in that realm. I actually have an Apples to Apple clone. I haven't played it yet, but I want to, just because it's Deadpool theme.
I felt bad. Actually, that Deadpool game is very different.
Is it?
From what I understand of when I bought it for you. But, no, I remember... We were playing Cards Against Humanity with a pretty big group, and my sister, who's not a gamer, she brought it out and she was like, "Yeah, we're all gonna play Cards Against Humanity." And I was like, "Okay, I'll sit out." And they're like, "What? You're a board gamer? Like this is right up your wheelhouse. I'm playing a board game with you." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't like it that much." She was like, "What? Are you too good, or like do you play all the good games? You're too good, fancy for this? Like what are you like a prep for games, like it's like, fine, I'll play you." But I was like, the reason I don't like it though is because it doesn't matter what you play. Like you don't have choice. And I was like, and I will prove it. And so and this was the only thing that definitely happened is I was like, and I'll prove it. And then they brought it out and I didn't tell anybody else what I was going to do. But every time we were all choosing our cards, I would look at my sister and shuffle my hand and then look at it and pick one at random every single time. Guess who won?
You did.
You're darn right I did. And guess who put as little effort as possible?
You did.
I did. It's just that's where it came down to it. There was that. And then she said, she was like, I still had fun. But I see your point. I was like, yeah, it doesn't matter.
My thing is, Cards Against Humanity, mind you. I played a lot of it when I first got into gaming because that's all some people wanted to play.
Yeah.
And it was huge when I first got into gaming. I think it was like 2014 when I started gaming. It was one of the games that everybody wanted to play. And it's still very popular, but I just got to the point where we were just constantly playing it. I was like, I was done. I've only been playing games for 6 months just because we played it so much.
Yeah.
And there's only so much you can get with such dirty humor. I'm like, at least make the humor fun or smart.
And here's why I don't like Cards Against Humanity. You see people play games like that, like gateway games as they're called, or introductory games.
What is it the Dice Tower calling out? Welcoming games.
Welcoming games, yeah. And the idea of those is that it brings people into the hobby, and any game that brings people into the hobby is good, right?
Yeah. No, I don't disagree.
That's good for the hobby. And so, like people who grew up playing Monopoly, it's like, okay, let me show you Catan, and then that becomes their new favorite game. Cool. Monopoly was your way in. How many people who are that obsessed with Cards Against Humanity that weren't gamers before are now gamers now?
Yeah.
I don't think that there's that many.
No.
I'm assuming, but how many people got into Heavy and the Stefan Feld games and they're like, what was your first game? Cards Against Humanity. Yeah. That's what brought me into the hobby. I think I've heard that.
Yeah, I think Cards Against Humanity really is just the college humor style game that people played in college while they were drinking and, doing all that stuff. But I don't think they really got into, I played Cards Against Humanity. Let me show you this game or stuff like that. Yeah. Because what are you going to show them? Apples to apples?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And apples to apples is fine. I actually prefer that.
I prefer apples to apples over Cards Against Humanity. I have literally not played that game since 2014, 2015, somewhere around there.
I don't blame you.
And it was a game that was played a lot.
Yeah, it was. And I played the mess out of it, and I still own a copy because it was handmade. It's the only reason. But, and that leads into my next one, is random. If a game, and you kind of brought that up, if a game is so random that you don't have a choice in the game, I think that's a huge flaw in a game. I think that does make a game bad, but I want to clarify this. I don't think random in a game is a bad thing. I think there are plenty of ways to do random well, and I'm going to clarify this later because this was a very interesting concept that our friend Jim explained to me because he was trying to pinpoint exactly what I meant by that. And he's, at first, the original theory was random makes a game bad. And I said, no, I don't think it does. He was like, okay, do you think more random makes the game worse? I said, no, not necessarily. He was like, well, let's do examples. And so the way we agreed with it is that if you play war, if you play war that's entirely random, it's no fun, right? Yeah. It's a bad game. If you play, say, for example, Candyland, also random game.
Yeah.
Not fun. But another game that is technically entirely random, that I consider a good game, Yahtzee. It is technically entirely random.
Except for it's random, but you get to make choices.
You still get to make choices in a lot of games, right? But you don't make choices as per the mechanisms. You
True.
Make a choice after the random is allotted.
Yeah.
Because it does not matter, like, you roll all 5 dice, yes, you choose some to reroll, or you choose not to reroll. Technically, right? But you have no way to control that outcome. It is entirely a random game.
Yeah.
There is no way to mitigate that random. But yet I think it's a good game because the choice you make is made after the random happens. And so he brought this up. He was like, well, it depends on when your choice versus the random is. So, for example, let's say we're playing Descent, right? Yeah. And I make the choice to move my piece into the thing and then fight that monster. And then I am beholden to the random dice roll because I've already made my choice. That is fundamentally a worse game than if I make the random roll, then choose what to do with it.
I could see that.
You see what I mean? Like, and I'm noticing this in a lot of things. It's like random in a game is fine. Like shuffling up a deck of cards and dealing out the hand, Yeah, that's fine.
So my question to you then is that, because you said you liked Gloomhaven when you played it,
yes,
it still has that randomness when it goes to the modifier cards.
Yeah, it's a minor thing though.
Yeah, compared to the dice rolls, it's not much different.
Absolutely, because in Gloomhaven it's a modifier. It either adds 1, adds 2. Sometimes it'll either
negate
two times or negate, but it's very rare, right?
Yeah.
This, I'm talking like if I get a game where I get 10 dice.
Basically pulling a Bryce?
Right? Yeah, if I get 10 dice, right, and I have to roll a 5 or 6 on any die to hit, and I roll all ones,
so
I didn't have a choice in that. I didn't have any function. That's flawed.
Yeah,
my skill and all the effort that I put towards that random outcome didn't matter.
Yeah, so I call it pulling a Bryce. I don't think you were in this game, but I was playing Eldritch Horror with our mutual friend Bryce again, Gamehead Geek over on TikTok, and I know how you feel about Eldritch Horror. He had like 10 dice or 12 dice, something like that. He rolled a bunch of dice because he had a lot of stuff that helped him get a lot of dice, and he was even blessed.
Yep.
So out of 12 dice, you want to guess how many times he hit the monster? No, he hit it twice. Out of 12 dice.
How did he get 12 dice in that game? Forgive me, I don't remember how.
He had like a shotgun, and he had some other equipment that helped him get more dice as he was playing.
See, I would think that the counter to that would be I make my attack roll, and then based on that, it's like, wow, I rolled really poorly. Do I want to make a choice to use my shotgun now? Which I know thematically doesn't make sense.
Makes sense,
right?
Yeah.
It doesn't. But then it's like,
because
all right, roll 2 more dice.
I think the weapon that he was using gave him dice to his dice pool.
Right, exactly.
And then he had like a lucky something or another that gave him more dice. And,
sure. Yeah.
But yeah.
But you see what I mean? Like, I feel like games that allow you to make that choice afterward to try and bump it up, I feel like is better. Hostage Negotiator is a solo game that does that.
Okay.
A 5 and a 6 is a success, but if you roll a 4, it's not a success, but you can discard 2 cards to make it a success. And that is a huge decision. If you're trying to get 3 successes, you roll 2 of them and a 4, you're like, man, these cards are the only things I can use right now. Do I want to discard 2 of them to push that ahead?
Yeah.
That's a great choice. But I don't know. It's random in a game. When the random happens,
you want the choice after you do the random rather
Absolutely.
than the beginning of the random. You think
being able to mitigate and deal with what you're dealt with randomly, it is a sign of a good game.
Okay, sounds good. So my next one goes along with what you were saying about streamlining, and that's overcomplications. This can make a game bad. I know some people like complicated games, and I'm not talking about games being complicated like. What is it? What is that big one? The 50s diner kitchen.
Food Chain Magnate.
Food Chain Magnate. Fine. Splatter games are really known for this. But what I'm talking about is like overcomplications when you're talking about like scoring or just making certain moves. And the one that just popped in my head for it when I mentioned it earlier was Founders of Gloomhaven. The scoring in that game is too complicated. Well, not too complicated, but there's an issue with it, and it makes it where people are not going to want to pull it to the table. We haven't pulled it to the table just because it just looks too complicated with the way the scoring goes. Because
just to confirm, you don't own a copy, right?
No, I don't.
Because I sold mine.
Yeah.
So we're never going to get to the table.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
And it's been on sale, and I could have bought it a couple times, but just from what I was reading and researching, and when you were looking at it, and we were both going over it together, the scoring is like, oh, this bounces off this, but this has to be built here, and this has got to go there for you to get your points off of this, and it's just like, why is it got to be don't get me wrong, I like Isaac Childress and I like his games, but at this point it's intimidating. Critic Chaos says it's almost intimidating, and this is what I'm talking about, like over complications.
It's not almost, it's very
and it's another thing we're talking about, like, I know a lot of people love this game, but Root, we haven't got it to the table just because of how asymmetric that game is. Makes it difficult for people to learn it, because it's also difficult to teach. Because my characters are going to play completely different from your characters, so you can't really tell me how to play, say, the Fox. I have to learn it on my own, and if I'm a new gamer, it's intimidating. And so when you make these games too complicated, it's going to scare people off. Another one that I brought up is Alchemist. You remember that game from back in the day?
Yeah.
You had to have an app, and I'm not against app integration.
That was one of the first app integrated games.
And what did the app do?
Basically just converted stuff.
Yeah, it kept the conversion charts together. I mean, you could play the game without it, but it's not recommended because it kept the conversion in the scoring for you. You need an app just to get your score and your conversion. That's it.
Now, in the defense, there could be an additional player playing that who would just simply be the person who would answer, like, hey, what happens when these two combine? Oh, it's
no, I get that.
But that's not fun for them.
Yeah, it's
I wouldn't wish that upon people.
Yeah, you need an app just to make your game better. It's not the app enhancing the games like when we're talking about with Mansions of Madness or Journeys to Middle-earth, where it's enhancing the game, making the game fun for you to play. This one literally just did the cleanup for you.
But I like that. I think that falls into the streamlined category. Because functionally it could work without the app. It's just
not
just ridiculous.
But that's what I'm talking about, like with the overcomplication. Yeah, when you specifically just to play this game, you need the app to make it simpler for you. Then it's not as streamlined as it really need to be. Because how long is that app going to be supported?
Yeah, no, it's a good point.
And so when I'm talking about overcomplication, if you make the game too complicated, we talked about it with Fister. He's got a lot of rules in his games, not streamlined, a little complicated. I like the games. But it doesn't make it a good game. It makes it fair and fine, and maybe if I play it more, I can understand it. But overcomplication of a game, just for the simple fact to be overcomplicated, is going to be a detractor for a lot of people.
Yeah. Cool. My next one is balance. And what I mean by balance is I feel like in a game, if every player was the same skill set, they would each have the ability to try or to win. And that goes into what we were saying about the Loop and Louie. But at the same time, balance, I mean functionally in the game. I don't think it's a good thing in a game when one person can pick up on a strategy that ends up being much better than another strategy that you can take in the game. And so I don't think that's a good design. And a good example of that is Magic the Gathering. And in my story that I'm going to rant against, for those of you who have played Magic the Gathering and know what I'm talking about, I'm going to throw in some card terms and some names of cards here in a minute. So otherwise, if you don't know Magic, that's fine. Stick with me. You'll see what I mean.
Yeah.
So Magic the Gathering suffers from a balance issue where a number of years ago, probably about 15 years ago, I was playing and I had a pretty competitive deck. I had one where I'd compete in tournaments, get second, third place, pretty obvious. Right?
Yeah.
And a person came in with a deck, actually 300 card deck, and said, "Hey, you want to play?" It's like, and that's allowed. You can play with as many cards as you want, minimum certain number.
Yeah.
I said, "Sure, yeah, let's give it a try." And he was like, "All right, do you want to go first or do you want me to?" I said, "Okay, sure, I'll go first." Draw my card, play a forest, your turn. And then so he brought out a card. He said, "Okay." Or before even the first turn, you could do a thing called a mulligan. Yeah. Where basically you throw back your hand, reshuffle everything, draw a new hand, normally lower than the few. And so he mulliganed about 3 times. And that was on purpose because he needed specific cards in his hand. It's like, okay. All right, well, yeah, sure, go ahead. And because I wanted him to have a chance, and I had a decent deck. He pulled out a swamp, tapped it, and did a dark ritual, which creates 3 black mana. Okay, nothing I haven't seen before. Then he plays Entomb, where you search your discard pile, or your draw deck for any card and put it in the discard pile. Cool. He put in a card called a World Gorger Dragon, okay, which I'll explain in a minute. And then he played a thing called an Exhume, where it enchants a creature, basically brings them from the dead, and exhumes them and puts them into play. So he had this massive dragon in play. That's not the problem. Not the fact that he had first turn, he brought in this big dragon, right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen that happen. You can have big creatures on the first turn. The part that was upsetting is the World Gorger Dragon has this very strange ability where when it comes into play, everything else in the game that's out in play gets exiled, which means you flip it face down and it's no longer part of the game for that time being. And it has this ability that says when it enters play, exile all other permanents, and when it leaves play, they all come back. Okay, fine, right?
Yeah.
Well, So the enchantment that's enchanting him is no longer enchanting him because it was removed from play, right? That makes sense. So then he gets put in the discard pile, which means that it comes back. And same with his land. So then he taps the land, but then it brings the World Gorge Dragon back. And then he does it again. And it's an endless loop.
Yeah.
And then he plays one simple card that says, target player draws X number of cards. He says, you draw your deck, you lost. First turn win.
It's crazy.
That's not... I had a chance, technically.
Yeah.
Because I played my turn. I played a single card. The problem is that the game mechanisms in Magic the Gathering allowed that to happen. And that is a balance issue that I think makes that fundamentally a bad game. Now, in Wizards of the Coast defense, when they realized that was a thing, that was even before the set came out. That was the first card to ever get banned upon release. The very first card, because they didn't realize that it could break things that badly.
Yeah.
And a lot of the other cards like Entombs, Exhumes, Dark Rituals, those are already banned. So it's not even a big deal. But the fact that they made it functionally in the game, that it can happen, that it can do that, and that somebody found this break in the system that completely breaks the game itself, and I think that makes functionally a bad game.
And so that was balance.
Balance.
All right.
Sorry, that's a long story for that. I'm not bitter at all for 15 years later, you know? But no,
right.
I'm not. Creative Chaos, but exactly. Essentially, they hacked it.
Yeah.
And that game functionally allowed it to happen, so that's a misbalance, and I think that's a bad game at that point.
So I'm actually going to make a switch here, and I'm going to switch my 3 and 4. So my number now 4 is going to be balanced difficulty.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is you have to balance out the difficulty. You can't let a game be stupid tough. And you can't make a game too easy, especially when it comes to co-ops.
I was going to say.
Mainly it's co-ops, but I'm talking about like balanced difficulty. This way, experienced players can still be able to play with new people as well. But this is mainly going into co-ops. Again, you can't make a co-op too easy because people are not going to want to play too much of it. Case in point, keeping it saxy. That was a very simple game. You and me both played it, and we're like, all right, we're done.
Yeah, it's the same game every time.
Yeah. And so, but you also don't want to make it too difficult. There's a reason why not a lot of people will touch Ghost Stories. It is a ridiculously tough game to play. I enjoy Ghost Stories for what it is, but it's tough. It's ridiculous.
It's mostly you made random after you make your choice.
Yeah, and you made a point about this a while ago about co-ops. A good co-op, on average, you can win it about 25% of the time.
Yeah.
Ghost Stories, you'll probably win it about 5% of the time.
Yeah, if that.
And keeping it saxy, you'll probably win about 80% of the time or so. So you have to get that balance. You have to make the game where it's going to intrigue and let people play that puzzle and work together, especially in co-ops. But again, with the balancing of the difficulty for what I really like about Terraforming Mars, when I talk about balancing difficulty for a Euro, is that I could put a handicap on me while the other players get to play, like, say, a basic what is it, government or corporation.
Yeah.
They can play basic corporation, so they get to keep all their cards, they get a set amount of money, and they can go from there. Whereas with me, if I give myself a corporation, I put a handicap. Yeah, I probably might get more money, but then I have to pay for my cards to begin the game. So it's a balancing act to make it where anybody can play with anybody, and a lot of games do good things about it. Matt Leacock is famous for it with Pandemic. He makes it where you can actually make it more difficult for more experienced players or easier for more experienced players, depending on how many cards you put in games.
Including one or two more epidemics.
Yeah. Or Horfight does another thing about that. If you want to play easy, just play with 2 monsters. If you want to play hard, play with 4 monsters. Yep. Or normal, play with 3 monsters. Yep. So you can ramp it up. If you make that balanced difficulty where everybody can work together and it's not too hard or too difficult, it's going to make the game fun.
Yeah, I didn't think of this one, but you bring up a very solid point. And it wasn't just me that came up with that statistic. I actually was brainstorming a cooperative game that I was designing, and I asked a friend of the podcast, Justin DeWitt, who made one of what I think is one of the funnest cooperative games, Castle Panic.
It's a brilliant game.
I think his game, there's less choice in it, but man, it's so fun. I don't know, it has no right being as fun as it is, but I enjoy the mess out of that game, and because there's a lot of good options that you can do, and I remember I was telling him about this game, and then he saw me. He's like, "Well, how often does an average player win?" I said, "About 25%." He's like, "Okay, yeah, that seems to be the right flavor," because then you don't discourage the players to the point where they just stop liking it because of how difficult it is.
Ghost stories.
And then like ghost stories. But then it's not just a walk in the park. You don't want it to be
too simple.
You want it to be where you're not winning all the time, because then what's the point? Like, for example, me and my kids, we just finished that whole campaign of Zombie Kids Evolution. We played it, I think, 19 times total. We lost once.
Again, that's also for playing with families and kids. So I get that. Yeah, no, yeah. I don't get what you're saying.
For kids, but I mean, I would have liked a little more challenge.
Yeah, no, I get that. And that's the thing about, like, with Gloomhaven. Why I like it so much is because it's difficult. We're right now playing it, we're stuck. We failed a mission.
Unattainable.
Yeah, we failed a mission twice in a row just because how difficult it can be. You could scale it to make it easier or less difficult and stuff like that. But it was a pain in the butt. So we just like, you know what? Let's take a break from this one. Let's go play a different scenario that's still open to us that we can go do. And that's what we did. We ended up winning that one. And now when we play it again, we might go back to that other one because it's a storyline game or a storyline part that we keep it moving. But yeah, it didn't make us upset. It sucked that we lost twice in a row to that same one.
Yeah.
But it allowed us to refresh. Okay, let's go. But we still won the next scenario. And so, I think it's just the balanced difficulty is important.
Yeah. This is my most fickle of all of these, and this is what makes a bad game. Poor components. And our previous conversation about summer camp, love that game. It's hard for me to justify it until I sleeve it. I don't want to play it again until I sleeve it.
Yeah, and I don't blame you on that. I don't want to
spend money on sleeves.
Yeah, and it's expensive because here I could pull it right now, but I think it's like 190 some odd cards or something like that.
Oh yeah, it's like 190 something cards, and there's a lot of good game in that. It's just they functionally didn't. They made the cards.
So it has 196 activity cards, 64 base cards. So right there tells me there's almost 300 cards you have to sleeve.
Yep, 300 sleeves. So that's almost the cost of the game itself, because they skimped out on the quality of that. And I don't mean like some people think it's like, oh well, cardboard versus minis. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying when the quality of the components gets in the way of the game.
Hasbro games. Just look at it. A lot of hobby gamers don't want to touch Hasbro games. One, they're not great games, but because of their quality too. Yeah,
the cards are very flimsy. Great. Yeah, they're very, very flimsy.
Very flimsy.
And it's a deck builder, so you constantly shuffle.
Yeah.
But like some examples, let's say, even Hasbro, like I'm going to put that aside because the components are kind of garbage, but you don't need them to be good.
Yeah.
Like they're not. It doesn't matter. But there are games like Nuclear War, for example, which I don't think is necessarily a good game in its first place, but there are examples of this where it has a spinner. Spinners are garbage, like fundamentally they're bad. And if it's a slightly misbuilt spinner, well then flick it and it goes whoop, and then it just stops wherever, like whatever number it gets stuck on. Like that ruins the game. And that's a fundamental component where the component quality itself can actually ruin it. And I'm going to throw Buffalo under the bus again because Tetris does that.
I know you're going to go there.
They have a sticker on the back of it, which makes sense on paper, right? You have a clear transparency sticker that sticks to the back of your Tetris board, and as you're dropping pieces, you're trying to align those pieces with the symbols behind it. Makes perfect sense functionally, right? Yeah. 2 problems. 1, there's bubbles on the stickers. Not a big deal, but it's like, oh, that's kind of irksome. Secondly, the colors that are on those symbols are the exact same color as the shapes themselves, and even though the shapes are transparent, the tetrominoes cover them up. You can no longer see them at that point. Thirdly, I don't know why they printed them this way, but the shapes are backwards on the sticker themselves.
And here's the thing about Buffalo Games. They're in Target, right?
Yeah.
So was Prospero Hall, and their games are around the same price with better quality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Tetris is what, $20?
They take that extra attention to detail.
So let's just compare. You said Tetris, right? Mm-hmm. How much that cost you? Like 20, 25?
Mm-hmm.
I paid for Horrified, that was 35.
Yeah, 35. It's still almost twice as much.
If we're talking about recent Goonies was a $35 game. Yes, it's almost twice as much. But guess what? I don't have to worry about the cards in that game. I don't have to worry about the pieces in that game. I don't have to worry about that money that you're saying about for... it's only $20, $25 at Target, Buffalo Games. So it's almost double the price. Well, guess what? If you got a sleeve summer camp, you're going to pay that. Yeah, you're going to double that price.
Yeah, and then
I don't have to worry about that with
little
Goonies.
Small minor things like in the Willy Wonka game that we talked about earlier.
Yeah,
there's 2 different coins. There's a 1 and a 3. They're the exact same color and shape and size. So you actually have to look and see. Okay. And it's gold with white font.
And here's my thing.
I mean, it's small little things like that can ruin the experience.
There's tools out there to help you with especially when it comes to what you're talking about, because it's our colorblindness. There's tools out there that help you. Stonemeyer's talked about it all the time. They use 4 different apps to work with colorblindness.
Yep.
4 different apps. It's like how hard it is. The guy who runs the Board Game Revolution has talked to board gamers or board game companies and says, "I'm willing to help you." For your colorblindness, for your games, because he's colorblind as well, and it's.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
And it's like let's make it where everybody can play the game. So component quality, I agree with you, is a big important thing. I don't have it on my list because it could make or break a game, but I'm not gonna take points away from it because the game's still good. Summer Camp is still a great game.
If the game didn't have those minor issues, the game would be better. But it's just, I don't know. That's tough for me because I feel like there are situations where that can happen.
And what's funny about it is that you brought it up, and I'm usually the component guy.
Yeah.
It's not even on my list. So the one that I ended up swapping with balanced difficulty, originally my 4, now my 3, is telling stories. And it goes with my number 1 later on, but we'll talk about it here, is my choices are making me tell the story. There's the thing about storytelling games too. I get why some people like them. It's because they're telling their story, but I still get to tell a story in a game. When I'm playing Everdell, it's my resource management, sending my workers out there to get me those resources. This is how I'm getting my points, whether I win or lose. I'm telling my story. I'm making my choices to tell my story, and so making a good game and allowing me to do that is amazing. It's what we talk about when we go into the top 8 debate. This is what leads to memorable moments. When I can make that smart choice that makes me go, that's right, I did this, and make a stand-up moment, allowing me to tell my story in a game is very important to make a good game. Because if you're just telling the game story, you're not telling a good story. In Gloomhaven, it's a campaign game. I keep bringing this up, but it's a campaign game. But I'm still getting to tell the story because I get to name my character, and I get to make my choices in the game to tell my story, how my character plays. Get you into that role-playing aspect even in board games. And so for me, it's very important to still allow, even if it's just a slight bit of storytelling, you get to tell your story of how you played the game.
Yeah. And Creative Chaos actually brought up something that I'm going to explain something. She said be all-inclusive. And I think that's something that we haven't touched upon yet is thematically you want to be inclusive. And we've all heard the examples of we're all going to go, as a team, go fight monsters. And you have the big, bulky, brutish guy with massive armor, and he weighs, 400 pounds of armor.
And then the woman outside
has the skimpy bikini. You're like, that's my armor. No, it's not. That's not inclusive. And then, or, even, people of minorities and stuff, not including them as the games.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to... if you have pawns, then that's fine. But, But if you're having character depictions of it,
I remember you
have no reason not to be.
There was a big old stink about somebody making 3D printed pieces for people for disabilities, like a wheelchair character for Dungeons and Dragons, and people were having an issue about it. I was like, that's great. It allows people to anybody can play Dungeons and Dragons, and if they want to play a representation of themselves as someone disabled, then why not?
Yeah, there's no reason not to.
Yeah,
absolutely. No, I completely agree with that. It's just that's something that I know Renegade is a big proponent of that. I give them a lot of props for that. They are very much inclusive like that. There's another company who made Monarch. I forget their name off the top of my head. But yeah, they're a women-led board game company.
I just can't remember what it's called.
They have a whole bunch of games that are specifically, like that is their business plan, is to be inclusive, and I appreciate every bit of that.
And the thing is, I sent you an article just recently about it where they were interviewing Elizabeth Hargrave, and she was talking about it like she likes board gaming, but it got to the point where it's just fantasy games or this and that. Yep. And not a lot of women want to play that kind of style. That's why she made Wingspan, because it was something she was interested in. She was interested in being bringing birds into board games. And it's true. Not everybody is into the fantasy, let's blow some stuff up, let's fight. They want to try different things. And so that's another reason why I like Wingspan so much, is because it's different. It's not the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that's a huge thing too, is that it's really neat when they go that extra mile to be inclusive for just about anybody. And color blindness is one thing. It's worth noting, like Nyctophobia. That's a great example of that game.
Yeah,
that is one of the most inclusive games. Why? Because one player, or all of the players except for one, can't see the board.
And not just that.
And that designer designed it for her blind uncle who couldn't see games, but he wanted an experience. And so she designed that game. And which, by the way, female designer, good job. Also, abandon all our jokes, female designer. I love the fact that it's like we could talk about these games and they are on par with everything else. Wingspan, all those. And you don't know that it's a female designer. And it surprises me when somebody actually, they like when they are surprised by that fact. It's like, oh wow, like this was made by a female designer. It's like, yeah, it's not just a bunch of old white guys anymore. It's,
here's the thing about that too is Elizabeth Hargrave talks about it. She keeps a rolling list of female designers because everybody thought she was the only one out there. No, there are quite a few out there.
There's more. There's quite a bit more. There's
what another thing I like about Wingspan is the only thing is Jamie Stegmaier is the publisher. He's the only guy attached to that game. The illustrators are all women. The designer is all women. He just helps with like play testing and publishing.
He published it. Yeah, I mean, he can't change that fact, it's his company, right? But yeah, no, the fact that he's that inclusive, it's brilliant. I'm off topic.
But because that wasn't even your number, what was it, 2?
Yeah, my second to last one that I wanted to talk about, and this is my last negative one. And this is a huge thing that I think it takes people out of and this describes a bad game, is the eliminability. That's a word, right? Eliminability of a player. If a player can be eliminated from the game, then I think that makes it a bad game. And I don't mean like after a number of turns they get kicked or they get knocked out because they're the hidden traitor and then they're found and then they still have like another ability. No, I mean like case in point, I really enjoyed this game. I want to give that disclaimer. It's called Nuclear War. It was incredibly politically incorrect game, but you're blowing up. You're
well, it was made during the time of.
It was made during the Cold War.
Aggressive mad.
1965 is when it was made.
Mutually assured destruction.
Yes, and there are cards in it where you have like a whole deck of like population cards, and not every country starts the same because you're playing as a country, so you have all sorts of cards, and there are cards called top secret cards where they just take effect immediately, and they affect either other players or they affect you. Well, one of the mechanisms in the game is you draw your starting hand, and then starting with the starting player, you just play all of your top secret cards and refill your hand until they've all been played.
Yep.
It's kind of like the go around the board once on Monopoly before anybody's allowed to purchase.
Yeah.
Which is just to make it so that way one person doesn't have a distinct advantage at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's technically chosen at random, which is just a really long, obnoxious way to do it.
Mind you, Monopoly was also made, in the 30s?
Yeah, exactly. One of our mutual friends played Nuclear War for the very first time. He sat down, he was excited to play it, and he played the top secret card, played the next one he drew, played the next one, and then lost all of his population and got eliminated before the first turn.
Yeah, still sorry about that. I didn't mean to do that to you.
It happened. It wasn't me. No, it was a friend of ours, and...
No, I know. I was the one that knocked him out.
We all laugh about it, but at the same time, that's not a good game. You cannot consider that a good game where, and this goes into our Loop and Louie argument.
When you don't even get to play
When you don't get to play the game.
And not even just that. We didn't even do the first herd. It was the setup of the game and he got eliminated.
Setup and he got eliminated from the game via setup. That's the only game I've ever seen that ever happening. And it was hilarious and amazing and everybody had a good time, including the player who got eliminated.
It was at the shop when we did that.
It was at the shop and it was one of those stand-up memorable moments. And it's been a running gag for many, many years down the line.
He won't let me live it down either. He's like, you eliminated me in nuclear war. I didn't have a choice in the matter.
Yeah. No, it was pretty rough. But yeah, that goes to show. I think that's functionally a bad game, is that if you can effectively eliminate a player from being able to play in the game itself, then that's a flaw.
All right, so this is my second to last one. It's probably going to be my more finicky one because we've discussed this before and you don't agree with me on certain aspects of it. But my number 2 is the rule book. If a rule book is not clear, concise, or can help you play or learn the game, it's going to take you out of it. My case in point, a mutual friend of ours backed the Batman Gotham Chronicles. Mm-hmm. And it looked like a good game, and it probably is with all the rules that they had to fix. I think it's on its 3rd version of the rule book now because of the issues from the first one. When we played it, we were looking up things, we were trying to figure out, and there was no way to do it. So we go to Board Game Geek to get rule clarifications. They didn't have rule clarifications yet, to the point where they had to make an errata, and then they had to make another. And then they just made a whole new version of the rule book. And then they had to make a 3rd version of said rule book. Mm-hmm. And if it's a bad rule book and it can't get you into a game, or you can't find what's going on, or how this is supposed to work, or this to work, and it's not that we skimmed over it, or it's like one little section over here that you may have missed. It wasn't in the rule book at all. And people were asking this question left and right on Board Game Geek when this game came out. Yeah. It made a game that I thought would probably be like a 6, 7, 8, maybe in my top, maybe even my top 10, because I'm a huge Batman fan, and this looked like a great Batman game, to the point where it became a 3. That's how much it took me out of the game. I didn't feel like I was playing Batman. I felt like I was trying to figure out what the heck's going on in this game. And a good rulebook does the complete opposite. If it's concise and teaches you the game well, it gets you into that game and have fun with it.
Creative Chaos asks if, one of my old streams, I think there was, and I think that might have actually been Founders of Gloomhaven.
Yeah, and there's another one right there.
Yeah, it's, I completely disagree with you on this one. Yeah,
and I get 100%.
And it's not, I think the rulebook breaks the ability to get into the game, but I think if the game mechanisms are solid, to where if you have to read like a whole novel to figure out the rules to functionally play the game, if the mechanisms are still there, it's still a good game. I just think that that's a poor implementation of how you learn it. This
could also be like the person who teaches you the game, so let's not forget the Power Grid incident.
True. But I don't think we can blame Power Grid for me not explaining it well, which is a total inside joke at this point. But it's the same as components. Like
but that's what I'm saying. It's my subjective.
It doesn't break the game technically.
Yeah.
But it makes it that much harder to want to play it or to be able to play it.
And that's why I said this is probably going to be my most argumentative one. But I think a good rule book is very important for a board game and make it good.
If a rule book has a rule that is actually incorrect, that breaks things.
Well, and there's another one. If they don't
Carpe Diem, I think, had that.
Or another one is I have the Century Golem editions, and I think in the second or third one they didn't translate it over for the Century. I think it's the second one, the pick up and deliver one. They didn't translate it over for Century Golem. It's basically the same rule, so they'll mention ships instead of minecarts and stuff like that. So they're giving me the rule set for the regular Century game rather than Golem. Which is fine. They play the same. But when you're reading through it, it's like, what is the ship? I don't see a ship here. It's because it's referencing the minecarts, and there was an issue with that as well.
I want to say it was in Carpe Diem. There was one game, and Rado, the board game reviewer, he told them a new one because he found out that there was actually a translation error, and the rulebook had a rule wrong. So it was being taught differently in German than it was when it was translated to English. And he said, I loved hearing that rant. He was wholeheartedly, that is unacceptable. You ruin the game because that is now the rules that I have to play off of because of what you translated. It shouldn't be my problem to go to.
Well, that's what I'm saying about Batman Gotham Chronicles. Right. I had to go fix the rules. We had to go look for it, and we couldn't find it anywhere. To the point where 3 versions for one game.
Right. And see, I don't know if, but I don't. And correct me if I'm wrong, but did the rulebook actually teach you the game wrong, or was it just so poorly written that it made it impossible?
Both. It was poorly written and made it impossible. But from what I read on the newest rulebooks and stuff like that, certain actions were supposed to trigger certain ways, and the river was supposed to, because it uses the Conan system, the river system for the bad guys, and so the river was supposed to trigger a certain way as well, and the rulebook had it triggering a different way.
Okay, then yes, then that absolutely, because if you were playing it functionally with that, then yes.
Or like it wouldn't even make mention of certain things like if this range item can do this, or if it can go through here, or like could you, since you're on an elevated area, could it go down into the street? Right. Could it hit a thug that's over here? It didn't clarify what you could do, so we weren't sure how a certain thing would work.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean about like a rulebook, and this why it's my example. This thing didn't tell us how half the game worked properly, or we couldn't find reference of it, or some of the iconography. There's iconography in the game. I couldn't figure out what the iconography meant because they didn't give you a player aid, or it was in the rulebook.
I'm going to give another example of one of my all-time favorite like little card games that actually did that, and it did it wrong. The rulebook explained it correctly, but there was a reference card. Mm-hmm. It's Dead Man's Draw is the name of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I know you're not a fan of, but I think it's a fantastic little game. But the first time what happened, there was actually an error in the reference card that said something completely contradictory to what the rules said. And it was indeed a typo. And if you played it that way, it wouldn't make any sense in the first place, because it was like steal a card from another player into the discard. It's like, well, what does that mean? Steal it into the discard. Like, do you put it in the discard, or do you take it from the discard? Like, steal it in, and that's a typo. It meant steal from another player and put it in your score pile.
Yeah.
And so much to the point where they got so much backlash for it, they had to reprint that reference card. And so in the second edition of the game, they reprinted it with a fixed card. However, they fixed that typo, but this card had 10 card abilities on one side, 10 on the other, and that's how you just flip it over to read each of the references. They fixed the typo, but they printed that same on both sides, and thus didn't have a reference card for half of the cards.
Oh, God.
It's like the oops again. And fine, it was a minor thing, and the rules did explain it correctly, but if the rules says it wrong, then yeah, that breaks game. I'm going to end with my last one being a positive note. Okay. And that, I feel, is the game's ability to give you, or to let you showcase your choices and your skills, like, effectively. Mm-hmm. Like, chess is a perfect example, I think, is a fundamentally good game.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any argument that people think it's like, oh, chess is a broken game. No, it's not.
Chess is just boring.
It's just really boring. Yeah. It's fine. But I will not say chess is a bad game, because I think functionally it is a very good game.
But here's the thing. You and me both watched Shut Up and Sit Down when he's talking about the history of gaming. Is chess really a game nowadays? Because it's a variant of a different game.
I know. Well, he actually argued Go. And the guys from Shut Up and Sit Down talked about... I think we've referenced almost every board game podcast on this. Anyway, Rodney Smith of Watch It Played says... No. Go is a game of pure strategy. It is absolutely brilliant the way Go works. And you can outplay another player by outplaying them legitimately. Like, I am showcasing my skills and my ability to understand and play Go, that I will win. And I think that makes it a good game. Yeah. And like a game that we like Stefan Feld, Trajan, like, there's a lot of opportunities where you can make your choices and say, okay, well, I see you're going for this, so I'm going to start going for the goods.
Yeah.
I see a good opportunity in those ship tokens, let's do that. But at the same time, I don't want this to go away, and I want to start getting these buildings to get extra actions because of how my tokens on my Trajan board work. That's brilliant. I think that is a great showcase. But then also, on the flip side of it, let's take a silly game, Ice Cool. You know, you flick little penguins across the thing. You've seen all like the videos of like the skill shots of the people like
doing those? I mentioned this guy on TikTok earlier.
Yeah.
Plumpy Thimble. This guy, or Plumpy Thimble, can do the best trick shots I've ever seen. Where he can go from like he's got to hit the hall monitor or be the hall monitor and hit a player. And so they'll be on this room, and instead of going through that door, he literally goes across all four doors and then comes back and hits them. And I'm just sitting there like, I can't even make it go through the door when I wanted to.
Right. And to explain it for our listeners, Ice Cool, if you haven't seen it, it's a game that's made up of a bunch of boxes that have like little holes in them for doors, and it's this huge box room thing. But all of your pieces are penguins that are like a half sphere on the bottom, and they're heavy. And then the top half of it is kind of like a thin penguin, and so it kind of wobbles. Like
what is it, the Wobble Weebles or something like that, where it's weighted at the bottom?
And so you flick it, and there's ways to jump it, there's ways to add spin to it, and the game is designed that way to where you can functionally like flick these around with ridiculous accuracy and skill.
Yeah.
And that game, I think, is functionally a really good game because it allows you to showcase your ability to utilize your skills or the choices. Like in something like a heavy Euro game, it allows you to do that. And even something like a more immersive, like Mansions of Madness, I think would be more on the lines of a good game because you, by understanding the lore and getting immersed into the game and showing your skills of like what you already understand of the lore, and of like what you think you understand about horror games or whatever, you can utilize that past knowledge to excel in it in a new way. I think that's a sign of a good game.
Cool. And so what is that topic? Or what is it?
Oh, that one, choices or the ability to showcase choices and skills. Which I'm peeking at your paper.
So my number one, it's not as skilled as yours, but my number one is another one of our top 8 debate topics, and that's meaningful choice.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is to make a good game, it lets me drive the game by my choices. And again, it goes with the storytelling. I'm telling my story by my choices. If it came down just too mechanistic, is the game driving the game or am I driving the game? Am I making the choices to win the game? In a sense. And so that for me is very important. If, again, we talked about it earlier, if I'm beholden by luck and draws and dice rolls and stuff like that, is it really a good game? Am I making a choice? Do I have ways of mitigating said choices and stuff like that? So for me, meaningful choice, it's very important for a game to have that because I'm not being driven by the game per se. I'm driving the game. I'm making the choices to come in last place or first place. Am I making smart choices or bad choices? It doesn't mean the game is bad. I'm just not making the smart choices in the game. And for me personally, I don't win a lot of games because I like being the chaos variant. I see, let me try this and see what happens. And sometimes I win and sometimes I lose. But I am driving that choice by making these where not a lot of people would like to go. They're like, okay, I see this point. This is the way I'm going to win the game. This is what I'm going to do. I'm like, what does this do? And that kind of thing. But I'm making that choice. So it gives me that choice to do for me to drive my story.
That's interesting. That actually makes a lot of sense. I really like the way you said that because you're still actively making the choice. Like, I know that I'm not going to win.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try this because it sounds fun.
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't matter whether I win. I want to see if it's possible. And you're trying to go full Loki on it as one of our terms for
Blood Rage.
Yeah, so that's intriguing, yeah.
And it's important. Meaningful choice. This is the reason why it's also one of our things in the top 8 debate.
And one of our biggest argued ones, too.
Because you have to drive the game yourself. If the game, or case in point, Monopoly, you don't really have a lot of choices in the game. No. You can auction or buy something.
Dealing is the only choice.
Yeah, you roll your dice, you land where you land. That's really all your choices. Whereas if I'm playing a game like Catan, we mentioned another one here, I still get to make the choice. I can make the choice to work with you, bid, trade, however I want to do it, where I want to build my stuff, buildings, or claim areas for I can get resources and stuff like that. That's all choices I drive the game. Whether I do good choices or not, I'm still driving the game. The game's not driving me, like Monopoly.
Yeah. Very good. Well, so that was our discussion on. Hopefully that wasn't too much to take in. I mean, we're only at 2 minutes and 2 hours and
4 minutes.
Yeah. It's standard for our podcast nowadays. But yeah, we hope you enjoyed what you listened to. Hopefully this gave you some ideas. Aspiring designers, hopefully this gave you some ideas of what to look for.
Yeah.
What gamers are looking for. And even if you're just a gamer, hopefully now this will help you find the next game you enjoy because of what you already like and what parts of this what to avoid and or look for.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're just new to gaming itself, it tells you where you should look. Is the game driving me or am I driving the game? What to look for. And also the games to avoid because we really tore into some games this time around.
We did. Sorry. Not really, but sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a good one.
You had it coming.
Yeah, it was bound to happen.
I trashed some of my favorite games of all time, so nobody's innocent here,
Also, want to make mention of the fact that we're coming up close to our 100th recorded episode, so we're going to have to do something special for that.
Yeah, and we already have some ideas that we're going to be talking about soon. That's very true.
Stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we have a big plan for that. We want to thank you so much for tuning in. Creative Chaos, thank you as always for being one of our regulars. We always appreciate your comments. And yeah, we want to thank everybody who provided comments on Facebook at the Board Game Revolution forum. Always great discussion on that. And, and go check out the topic that we did. If you have a Facebook, go join the group. They're awesome people. And then see what the next people say. I'm sure there's going to be more discussion on it as well. As always, we want to thank you for tuning in. If you want to tune in live, like Creative Chaos did, join us at twitch.tv/everydayboardgames, and you can join us on a live episode.
As well as you can find all video re-uploads found on YouTube at Everyday Board Games 2020. And if you like what we do, there are 3 things you can do to help us grow on that platform. Subscribe if you're not. Like this video and comment down below and tell us your thoughts on the subject matter.
And if you ever want to just say hello or reach us directly, maybe give us an idea for a future episode, anything along those lines, email us at everydayboardgames2020@gmail.com.
As well as you can also find all audio versions found on most podcast platforms under Everyday Board Games Podcast. This includes Spotify, Google, Amazon Music, and Podbean. And you can also get in contact with us on our official Twitter account at EBG Podcast. I have been using it more recently by posting pictures of games that we've played, and I'm trying to be more open on that one, as well as we may be starting a TikTok here pretty soon.
Tune in. Tune in for TikTok. That's a lot of T and K's.
Yep.
We want to thank you for tuning in. As always, I've been your host, Daniel.
And I've been your host, Daniel.
And we want to thank you for listening to me hitting the mic and listening to Everyday Board Games.
And remember, every day is a good day for board games.